Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Eclipse Day to everyone today. There's a solar eclipse on the last anaretic degree of Aries today. We're going to take another look at this eclipse. And today what I thought would be interesting is to look at the different kinds of lessons or teachings or insights that may be available to us through some of the main signatures of the eclipse, especially the fact that this eclipse is at an anaretic degree, squaring Pluto, hosted by the fallen Mars in Cancer. So we're going to look at some of those things in depth today in terms of the kinds of, not only the kinds of themes you might notice, but the kinds of insights and lessons that may be available to us right now. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. When you share your comments, it really helps the channel to grow. So always appreciate hearing from you guys. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I want to take you over to the website right now because, as you guys know, we are in the midst of enrollment season for my upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It's a one-year course in ancient Hellenistic astrology with a sort of fusion of modern archetypal astrology, psychological astrology. So it's a nice blend between ancient and modern forms of astrology. If you go over to nightlightastrology.com and click on the courses page, you'll see the first year course. You can scroll down to learn more about it, see what alumni have had to say about it. You get 30 classes on the year. They're all 2 to 3 hours each, including a lengthy Q&As at the end of every session. So sometimes they go all the way up to about 3 hours. So anyway, those are all recorded, so you can attend live or you can follow along with the recordings at your own pace. We also have 12 guest lectures that come in. We have an interactive group forum discussion that's staffed by tutors. You can ask questions, get an answer within 24 hours. We have breakout study sessions in between units if you need extra support, all sorts of built-in bonus material, reading and additional videos and quizzes and things like that. So there's a ton of material there to support you in either developing a practice or in just deepening your love and knowledge of astrology, which is a gift that really gives back your whole life long. The more you know about astrology and the more able you are to read charts, even if it's just for yourself, family, friends, you have an incredibly valuable tool that can help you navigate the different seasons of life. What to speak of those of you who also may be called to read for other people, which is something we really hope that a lot of our graduates do, and a lot end up going on to have their own practices. At the bottom of the page, you'll see some payment options. We have the early bird payment, which saves you $500 off. There's a payment plan. You can spread things over 12 months. And then what I'm really making sure that we get the word out about is our need-based tuition. We have a limited number of spots available in every program that allow for people to take the program at a discounted rate because you have a fixed budget, you have a tighter income, and you can't, we don't want people to go, and harm themselves in their, their livelihood. And so we have, for people who, maybe only working part-time or in between jobs, or, you've got, you're both working, you got kids, and we understand how life goes. So if you are in a situation where you'd love to study, but you need a little bit of help to do so, tell us your situation, apply now, and we'd be glad to work with you. Please do that early because we do have a limited number available, and we're trying to avoid the situation that often happens, which is we get flooded with requests the last week before the program starts. So we're just trying to avoid that, get the word out early, apply early, and we'll get back to you and get you set up right away if you qualify. So take a look at that on the page. If you have any questions, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Okay, well, let's take a look at the real-time clock and remind ourselves of what the heck is going on today, and that is a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, the last anaretic degree of Aries. The sun crossing over into Taurus today will also be moving into a square with Pluto. So it's a very Plutonian eclipse, which adds to the theme of power, depth, intensity, forceful transformation. But also the last anaretic degree of Aries with the sun exalted doubles down on the same theme. So we've got fire and Plutonian Hades-like transformation in the air around this one. What to speak of the fact that this eclipse is also hosted by a powerful but debilitated Mars in Cancer. And then we also have the fact that at the halfway point of this cycle, if we go a little bit further in, what's going to happen between now and the full moon? Well, by the time we get to the full moon, we are talking about a lunar eclipse in Scorpio with the moon in its fall, but there'll be mutual reception between Mars and Cancer and the moon in Scorpio, which is very interesting. So we are moving into a very Marsy, very Plutonian eclipse cycle with some very powerful signatures. For example, at the time of the full moon, we're going to have a Sun conjoined Uranus moment. So super powerful, and yeah, but just very powerful looking stuff in the this next lunation cycle. So today what I want to do is, given the fact that we have this signature of the anaretic degree, the last degree of Aries, which is a very powerful degree, but one that usually points toward the deconstruction, the chaotic or destructive elements of nature, right? And then the Plutonian element, which is the death and rebirth trigger. And then the fact that we have Mars in Cancer underlying everything. So 5 lessons that I think we can draw on from this solar eclipse in Aries. And this was actually also informed by an I Ching reading that I did this morning, focused on this eclipse and what kinds of lessons it might provide. If you want to take a look at that reading, I'll give it to you right now. It's hexagram 51 with the 5th line changing, which leads to hexagram 17. So that would be the hexagram of thunder, or shock. Sometimes it's called shock, and it leads to the hexagram following. So I'll be kind of explaining that in certain pieces as I go along here. But lesson number 1. Now, these are not this is not like an exhaustive list. You could come up with others, and in fact, if you have other things to add that you think would be valuable, please do add them into the comment section. Number 1, avoidance makes things harder. Now, I'm saying this because you can't avoid things that are major events taking place at anaretic degrees have been cooking for a long time. The early part of a sign is about creation, the middle is about maintenance, and the end is about destruction, like the Hindu trinity of gods that you have carrying those modalities. When you get to the very last degree of a sign, it is the end. And it's the bill that's come due, so to speak. And I don't mean that with any punitive sense, like, oh, you did something wrong, or that you're being punished or anything like that. I just mean that this is something that's been cooking for a while, and we're reaching a point of no return, a point of transformation that cannot be avoided. The other thing is that Mars in Cancer hosting an eclipse at that degree, Mars in Cancer, one of the things that, Cancer, like the crab, like scuttles sideways, right? It tends to go around things. And this is an eclipse that may call into question the way that we've been going about things and whether it is direct enough or effective. And one of the things that, frankly, Mars in Cancer sometimes will struggle with being afraid or of avoiding things that are difficult. And then you also have the signature of Mars in Cancer of getting up the emotional courage to face things. And both of those are Mars in Cancer. So you could see some Mars in Cancer natives will be incredibly brave and protective and assertive emotionally, and others that will tend to get walked on a lot or collapse into fear and being, too passive or timid or something like that. So one of the lessons that I think is built into, kind of baked into this eclipse, is the fact that something is happening that we can't avoid, and trying to avoid it because we're scared or afraid, or taking a more passive approach could be maybe it might not work so well. So, and these are just lessons that I've seen from people over the past couple of weeks with Mars in Cancer, as well as just Mars in Cancer natives, over long periods of time. Is that one thing that can happen with Mars in Cancer is that there's a fear of dealing with difficult, tumultuous emotional spaces. And I think this eclipse is asking us to face some things head on and to recognize that we've reached a point where something can't be avoided. We have to just deal with something. And summoning the courage and the faith in ourselves that we have the resources we need to do this, to face something. I think that's implied in this eclipse potentially. So avoidance makes things harder. Let's face things. Let's face things that, there's a podcast my wife listens to called We Can Do Hard Things. And I've listened to it a few times with her too. And I like the podcast. It's pretty neat. But anyway, like the slogan for this eclipse, we can do hard things. Avoidance makes things harder. We can do hard things. We can do it. We can face hard things. Number 2, being honest about our needs is clarifying and healing for everyone. Aries is very assertive. It's a sign that sometimes, it's so assertive that it can feel like it's bullying or domineering or like self-centered or like there's not a great sensitivity or awareness sometimes of the needs or realities of other people. That's how strong Aries can be, sometimes not intentionally, just by virtue of the fact that it's just this flaming hot assertive Mars sign where the sun is exalted. Mars in Cancer underlying this eclipse could be, especially since it's at an anaretic degree, what kind of boiling point could we be reaching? This is how I feel. This is what I need. And it's been hard for me to say this. It's been hard for me to let people know who I am or what I need or what I'm all about. So being honest about who we are, what we need, where we're going, even though it could upset other people, and that might be the great fear of Mars in Cancer with the eclipse in Aries is, I mean, maybe you could have someone who's just bulldozing other people under an eclipse like this, but I think one of the, and of course that would be not very cool, but but another thing that we could run into would be I'm having a hard time letting people know who I am, what I want, where I'm going, what I need, because I'm afraid of conflict. I'm afraid of disappointing people or of not being met or respected. And the truth is that when we are becoming some new version of ourselves, or we're evolving in some ways personally, not everyone's going to be along for the ride. In fact, some people will resist because they don't appreciate that they can't stick the same old projections on you that they have in the past. Oh, well, you don't make such a nice mirror for me to look at myself in any longer. Or there's something about who you're becoming or where you've gone with your life, the choices you've made, the people you've chosen to surround yourself with, or the lifestyle or religion or the subjects like astrology that you get into. And some people go like, well, I just don't like them anymore. I don't like what they've become. And so we know that, and because that's not an easy thing to deal with, and it can mean the breaking of various emotional bonds in our life, we'll avoid it. We'll just avoid at all costs, being real about who we are, who we're becoming, what we need, and so forth. So being honest about those things, though, is clarifying and healing in the end, because let's say there's a few people who don't want to be around you anymore. There's people who are upset, or there's some level of trauma you have to revisit, or there's testing of bonds that happen, or whatever the case might be, facing that and going through it, generally speaking, will be very healing, because you'll feel stronger and better about yourself. You'll start probably getting into healthier patterns where your needs and your more honest, authentic self-expression is present. And then if there are people who just can't hang, well, good riddance. Not to be a jerk, but good riddance. If they can't hang with you in the way that you are and who you're becoming and what your honest needs are and so forth, then that's good, because then there probably will be new relationships and new people coming that fit better. So we can't be afraid of doing some emotional spring cleaning. And being honest is the starting point for that. We can be honest without being a jerk. We can be honest without being antagonizing, or without being bitter or resentful. We can just be honest and start to experience that clarifying and healing effect of our honesty, which will spread around us. Other people may be honest in return. Maybe we have to hear some hard things or face some hard things about other people too. But usually that is clarifying for everyone, if we can get past the fear of that open, vulnerable sharing and just being a little bit more assertive. This is the Mars and Cancer dynamics. 3, failure is often the first sign that forgiveness is coming. Now, I really can't express how much this one has meant to me personally over the years. There's been a variety. I noticed in the news recently that as Sun and Jupiter were coming together, and we talked about the potential death or scandals and challenging events related to leaders. And I mentioned political leaders and, people who are Sun-like or Jupiter-like, that there was this scandal involving the Dalai Lama, which, that was really disheartening to read about. And I'm not going to sit here and issue any condemnation or judgment. I'm just simply, that's what my response was. It was just a little shock and disappointment. But also what I find really interesting, having gone through this a number of times in my life with a father who was a minister who had a pretty serious nervous breakdown and some huge moral spiritual failings, having witnessed them at times in my life, in myself, in shamans I've worked with, in gurus and religious communities, and there's always this temptation to sort of, I don't know what the phrase is, like throw the baby with the bathwater. I think that's the phrase. And I'm certainly not condoning anything, right? Any kind of poor choices or unethical actions or anything like that. But what I've noticed in my life is that when someone fails me, or I'm really disappointed in someone because I feel like they've failed in some way, morally, ethically, maybe they failed me as a friend or whatever. Or I've failed. I mean, probably more regularly that's the experience. Is that it's usually a sign that for me anyway, that a deeper level of letting go, of forgiving, and of inviting a kind of compassionate understanding, even if the compassionate understanding is just sort of throwing my arms up and saying, well, this only reiterates the realities of impermanence, suffering, pain, hardship, fallibility, vulnerability. We're fragile beings, and we all have demons. And at this point in my life, it's like I don't need any more. I don't. There could be more failure on my part or on the part of people that I admire, and I don't think anything at this point would shock me in terms of what people are capable of. I mean, I'm sure it could get a lot more real and terrible, but I wouldn't be surprised that people can be capable of very dark things and of failing, and by contrast, that the same people who can fail so intensely, so deeply, can be capable of so many good things too. And that complexity is part of what I feel that we are learning to live with. Not only learning to live with, but learning to appreciate. And I don't mean appreciate in some unicorn, false positivism. Like I'm not talking about some kind of rose-colored glasses that condones and looks aside at the darkness. But I still feel like one of the beautiful things about failure is the way that it invites me more deeply into my humanity and an experience of humanity. Speaking of nature, of our nature and of nature itself, of the fact that it is a complex phenomenon that includes pain and suffering and confusion and seriously falling short at times. But I also know that when those things happen, I always come to have a deeper, like quieter, more mysterious and poetic appreciation for life that comes eventually. And I feel like when failure comes, it's like, oh, well, pretty soon the forgiveness rains are coming. And that just seems to be a part of the archetypal pattern, that there's the failure is like the sun burning too bright and everything gets dried up, and it's like a drought. And all of a sudden we're just, we're burnt out from the feeling of things not working out. But I've noticed that if I can step into that space and really feel those big feelings, that not too long, the forgiveness rains come. And I think that, one of the things that can happen with the sun in an anaretic last degree, with Mars in Cancer, Scorpio eclipse coming, is we may be faced with frailties, the fragile, vulnerable, failing places in ourselves and in life. Our organs will fail us eventually. Our parents often fail us. We fail as parents. Our lovers fail us. We fail as lovers. All different ways in which we fail. I think what's more important than getting stuck on the failure is to keep watching what happens. That failure is just the first, failure is just like the first part of a sequence of events. And it often leads to this kind of rain. The rain it's like Saturn in Pisces a little bit too, right? It's melancholic, but cleansing and purifying. I think there's a lot of that coming in a very emotional moon cycle with a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio with the moon in Cancer as well. Anyway, number 4, shocking or disturbing events are natural. So here's the thing: is you get into eclipse season, and one of the things that can happen is that you have repeated like staccato, events that are big. It's like big wave sets are coming through. Big waves are coming, and they come in sets. And it's hard to feel like these big energetic waves are crashing down on you and close together, repeated in succession. And one thing I've learned over time with these moon cycles, because especially in the comments section, if you watch, you can really tell who's getting rocked, in the way that they're commenting. And I actually posted a video on Instagram last night, I think it was, or yeah, it was a couple nights ago, maybe. It was really, it was this woman who was like kind of just jogging out into her driveway to like get something, and she tripped on a crack in the pavement and just spilled out, and she's like caught on this like surveillance video or something, and she's just laying there, and she goes fuck this. She was like, fuck this life, I can't take anymore. She's just like it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, she wiped out in the driveway and is just laying there, and just like that event was just the one that just tipped it all over. And then she ended up laughing and getting up when someone came to check on her. But I thought this is what eclipse season is like. You're walking along and one thing happens, and it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's the fact that it's the 4th or 5th biggish thing that's happened, and you're just like, screw this, I'm done. It's hard to go through periods of time where there are major astrological transits, happening close in succession. There's a reason that eclipse videos are always the time when subscribership goes up on the channel. There's more people watching the videos than pretty much any other time. And that's because eclipses bring to mind the fact that, okay, we're coming around a tight turn again karmically, and everyone perks up. Mercury's turning retrograde right after this eclipse, in a pretty close conjunction to Uranus. So what I want to say is that it's easy to get like astrological fatigue. I've sometimes joked, like, we need like an astrological wellness checks. How are you doing after the 40th transit in a row? But here's the thing: is that people sometimes are going to be like, we joke about this. So I like to laugh at these things too. Well, screw 2023, let's hope for a better. But here's the thing: it's not going to be better in 2024 or 25 or 26 or 20 ever. And the reason for that is that what we're really looking at is we're looking at archetypal weather. We're talking about the fact that reality is a pattern generating form of expression, and it moves in these familiar patterns. One of those patterns is that big wave sets come in occasionally, and they're just big waves, and those waves they're powerful, and they take themes that we're all familiar with, and they crank up the volume and the strength and the potency in which they wash over us. That is natural. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that you need. There's not a test that you need to pass. There's not something that you have to get done during this period. There's not a talisman to wear, or it's like there's no special reason that any of this is happening either, any more than we need to look up and say that there's one special reason the sun is shining, or that it's rainy, or that it's snowing, or that it's autumn. Shocking, disturbing events, big events, energetically overwhelming events in close succession, that's part of reality. It's just part of it. Learning to live with it and accept it as part of what is the best coping mechanism. If you look at what the ancient astrologers said, why do we study this? We study it so that we can develop equanimity and a kind of cosmic poise within ourselves. Doesn't mean you don't go through the events. It means that you experience them with a sense of deepening love, intimacy, that meaning is created through the living out of the events. it really helps us to stop thinking that what's happening right now is so exceptional. Okay, it's eclipse season. There's always a million transits going on. This is not abnormal. In fact, this is normal. This is the norm. Now, I think that we create a lot of stress for ourselves. And because we create a lot of stress for ourselves in lots of different ways, and I'm just going to try to talk about all the ways we create stress for ourselves, just look at your own life. I look at my life and I go, oh, I look at all the ways I create stress for myself. There's so many. Um, so because we're often, uh, making things more complicated and so much more stressful than they have to be, when these successive waves come in, which is natural, not abnormal, we think that they're natural or abnormal because we experience them washing over and through all the different areas of our life, and we find it very difficult to manage. But that's because our lives have become unmanageable, right? That's because we're trying too hard to be too many different things that we aren't, or we're stressing ourselves out with too many expectations of ourselves. Our inner voices are too intense and not nice enough. We're expecting too much out of other people. We're not taking good care of our bodies. So many different reasons that when natural strings of successive astrological events occur, we think somehow the astrology is exceptional, when really it's that our lives are exceptionally stressed out. And of course, an exceptionally stressed out life is going to experience any kind of natural, intensity in the weather, even the physical weather, as like adding to my stress. So, I mean, one thing that for me has been very liberating is to realize that these successive events are natural. They're just part of things. So too is our craziness and our stress and our busyness. So we can take some pressure off of ourselves and say, well, I'm doing the best I can. I'm just a crazy little human. So let's take a moment to defend and advocate and protect our vulnerable, crazy making nature alongside of the crazy making nature that is eclipse season. It's okay. It's all good. It's all part of this life. Even that shift of mind and mood can help. Or anyway, sometimes when it rains, it pours. So the other thing is that, there are seasons in our lives. Set aside, just the mundane level at which we're tripping in the driveway and falling on our back and, like screaming at the gods or whatever. Sometimes there are seasons in our life that it's not just about dealing with a lot of energy or repeated intense events that are manageable but amplified by our already crazy lives. No, we're talking about when you lose something. You lose a parent, you lose a lover, you lose both within a week. Sometimes there are seasons of incredible loss and stress and trauma. And that's real too. That's a part of what these seasons can imply. These seasons are often the ones in which I see people dealing with the major health issues there can be really big events, and it's not just that, well, it's raining again and let's just get used to the fact that it rains. No, sometimes when it rains, it absolutely pours and it floods our lives, and we go through a healing, transformation, and crisis. And if that's you right now, just know that you're not alone. There's a lot of people going through things, when these kinds of astrological events come along. People sometimes go through some of the most important, traumatic, but maybe life-changing events that they'll go through. The kind that will have a positive impact on your life that you may not be able to recognize for 5 years, but you will. Now, the one thing I wanted to say about this is that in all my years of doing astrology, I'd say 90% of my clients, when they go through major traumatic, difficult events, during big transits, eventually they say that was some of the most important, beautiful things that ever happened to me. That is like 90% of the time what people say, with enough time to heal and get perspective. But when you're in it, you're in it. And so if you're in it right now, if you're really going through something, just know that you're not alone, and that the goal, if I had to say, like, the spiritual goal or purpose of having astrology in our lives is to sanctify the moment, to know that This season is orchestrated by a cosmos that is ultimately loving, meaningful, beautiful, and worth putting our faith in as a process that we're participating in. I hope that you can find that faith in the midst of anything you might be going through right now that's really challenging, because sometimes it's not just rain, it's not just big wave sets, it pours and it wipes out your house. I recently talked to someone who had an astrological transit that their house burned down. They just got a new house. They were literally moving in, and it was a Pluto transit to their house, to their moon, and they literally had their house burned down. Can you imagine? I mean, that's a big event. And there's a lot worse than that. But sometimes, that's what the astrology brings. It brings, really heavy, intense events. So if that's you right now, keep the faith. It will be okay. You will get through this. Trust that there is a design to our fate and our destiny that we can't always see when we're in the midst of something challenging, but we will eventually. So that is my ultimately, I hope, a hopeful message for people out there who are, maybe like, okay, listen, nice advice here, but I'm getting my shit rocked, So if we can all maybe join ourselves sprawled out on the concrete, like lifting the middle finger to the gods, like, come on, guys, this is insane. I'm done. But I hope that you found some laughter and some insights and some sense of not being alone in it this week. That's what I've got for today. I hope you all have a wonderful eclipse. Tell us your stories in the chat section. If you want, you can use the hashtag grabbed or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. One of the ancient names for the planets are grahas, or grabbers. They grab our consciousness. They move us around like puppets. But if we study astrology, then we participate in the unfolding of the planetary energies. And the dual meaning of the word graha means to grasp. We understand something of what they're doing in our lives. So with that, have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow.